we'll go ahead and get started for the agenda with today's chapter council meeting and try and schedule the next meeting. Normally we do them roughly monthly, so does anyone have any strong opinions for when the next meeting should be? I do ask we keep most chat in the CC meeting chat channel. And then we may need to move to the motions and votes if there are things that we need to conduct on that side of things. I'm seeing July 16th. Typically, our chapter council meetings have always been on Sundays, so I'm assuming Zucker may have meant July 16th. July 9th. Okay. Do we have any other seconds for any of those dates listed? I see a second for July 16th. Are there seconds for any of the others that have been submitted thus far? That's a fair. So Zucker was mentioning that scheduling closer than January 16th due to interview for election applicants. That's fair. It may just need to be its own individual event instead of being a full-on chapter council meeting in and of itself. That may be something that they can that chapter reps can still participate in, and we can have scheduled just as its own standalone thing, as opposed to being a regularly scheduled chapter council meeting. Okay. Do we have a second for having that as having a interview / meeting to? Yeah. Okay, I'll add that to the agenda just as a note for next time, or so that people are aware of what's going on. Yep. Not a problem, Zuckrid. Okay, I have seen seconds for July 16th. I've seen July 23rd, and I've also seen July 30th. So if you don't mind, move to the CC motions and votes, and I will make a post. Go ahead and respond with which one you prefer. Okay, go ahead and respond to that with when you prefer to have the next chapter council meeting. Keep in mind that we have a 2-week limit for proposals, so the earlier meetings may be more frequent, but you have a much shorter time for being able to get your proposals in beforehand. For those that are just joining, we are currently having the reps vote on when the next meeting should be. If you can go ahead and post in the motions and votes chat with either the 16th, 23rd, or 30th, that'd be much appreciated. Also, if you are the only rep responding for your chapter, you can put a X2 or a 2X in order to indicate that you're the only one for your chapter. Just 1 second. All right. I think a couple more people have joined. We are voting on the next chapter council meeting, either the 16th, 23rd, or 30th. Please respond in the chapter council motion and votes chat. It was about 2 or 3 more minutes to get that handled. Okay, I am showing 8 for July 30th and 6 for July 16th. If anyone has a different count, let me know. Otherwise, the next chapter council meeting will be July 30th at 7 p.m. And that's 7 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. I did add July 16th as a election candidate interview, as Zegrid had requested. So just go ahead and make the announcements for that, Zegrid, as they come up and as you get details kind of hammered out. And then we'll just have the reps available. For those reps that are available and able to attend, we'll be able to get more information about the candidates and all that. Next point 3 on the agenda is the election officer update. So turn it over to you, Zegrid, on how we're looking for the VOD elections.
Okay, so we have some brainstorming to do. The long story short is we have currently 5 applicants, 3 of which are already incumbents that are currently in office. This is before any background check processing, which is currently where we're at. So they've been sent instructions for background checks. I'm waiting on those to return. We had a 1-month application window. Normally that application window was going to be about 2 weeks. I went ahead and extended that proactively because I noticed that we did not have enough applicants to be able to process to run the election. That's currently still the case. I utilized multiple social media posts to garner interest. The post gathered minimal reach regardless of who had posted them. So, I had asked for the DBGA account to post, and I created some posts myself as well, and I don't know if those were, the reach of those posts was limited because there was minimal engagement or something else, happened there, but either way, we use multiple social media posts from multiple different accounts to try to gather interest, and we're still having a lack of applicants. Now, I had posted about this issue on May 31st in the CC Reps Only chat channel. Currently, that has, that notification of the issue itself kind of had minimal response. And so I think we as a chapter council have some brainstorming and some thinking to do on how we want to handle this situation. Now, I've thought of a couple of options where we can respectfully request that the current incumbents continue their terms. However, that's something that I wouldn't. We can ask them, but I wouldn't want to force that or go out of policy on that too much, especially because if they didn't apply for this year, maybe they have something going on in life, or they would like to pursue other projects or whatever the case may be. But either way, that's where we stand right now.
What would the deadline for accepting nominations be?
I'm sorry? What was that?
I think they're typing it in the meeting. Oh. I think they had asked when the deadline for accepting applications would be.
The deadline for accepting application, the original deadline was May 28th. The extended deadline was July 9th. I am willing to consider any further applicants still, and the form is open. So honestly, we will continue accepting applicants until we get at least one for each role. Currently, the ones that are that have no applicants are the Director of Records and the Director of Finance. Everything else has at least one. There are only so there's one for Chapter Liaison, one for Director of Public Relations, and one for Executive Director, 2 for Arbiter. Those are the candidate breakdowns currently.
Okay, thank you for the update.
What channel are those currently under?
Ericos, I'm really sorry, I'm not catching your voice very well. Can you say that again?
My apologies. What channel are those currently listed under?
That breakdown is not provided on any channel yet. The CC Rep only chat has the notification of the concern, and I can link to you that message.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just an FYI, while we're talking about finance, the taxes for last year, I don't believe have been filed yet.
All right, thank you for the heads up on that too. Thank you for bringing that to the attention. Zucker Demorne is currently asking who are the current candidates that have applied for different positions.
Okay. Would you like real names or game names?
Let's do game names for now. I think that's gonna be more recognizable.
Okay. Sil is under candidacy for continuing his role as the Director of Public Relations. Thank you, Sil. Cyrilay is, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Please let me know. I would be glad to fix my pronunciation. Is continuing to run for the chapter liaison. We have an entry for the director. Hang on one second. We have an entry for 2 entries for Arbiter, which are let's see, Reacher, the current the incumbent, and then we have Ela of Chapter Jericho. For the executive director, we have 1 candidate, Alacris de Valinor.
Is it Alacrest was for the executive director?
That's correct, yes. Okay. And I can provide this data in the CC meeting chat or CC rep only chat if you would like.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second. It'll take me a second to kind of get that in a digestible format for Discord, but I will post it here in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Perfect. No rush. Tomorrow says they're going to get on that issue with the tax filing, and Jeffrey is saying that the bylaws, it was asking who covers up the empty spots in bylaws. I think that goes to the executive director as far as, like, I don't know that's how it's specifically handled in there, but I think that they're then able to appoint or get it handled in the bluntest of terms.
If somebody is looking for assistance with the taxes for this past year, I'm willing to help out with what we've done in the past.
Thank you. That's cool. Okay, so I don't know. Does anyone have an idea on the path forward for further applicants? We have had a month of opportunities for people to put in or apply for these roles. There has been minimal engagement. There's a minimal response. Do we allow the bylaws to function as they are intended and let the next executive director handle it, or BOD may appoint another board member to perform the responsibilities critical to keep the legal update? Yeah. Okay. So only until the next meeting. Go ahead, Zachary.
Yeah, so I mean, we can respectfully ask that the current director of finance and director of records continue their tenure until the next election cycle. It's going to throw a wrench into things in terms of the next election cycle because we are trying to institute a change in how that election cycle is run, or the duration for each term, and how, you know, or when those roles are rerun for election.
Okay.
But that would be one potential option.
Antoine says they're going to self-nominate for director of records, and break it down. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Just a question for Reacher, I guess. Is this your first or second term as arbiter?
I don't know that. Oh, Reacher is here. Reacher?
Sorry, I didn't have my hands free. I'm here. This is like 1.5.
I don't know how we're gonna characterize that then, because he can't serve more than 2 terms consecutively.
Correct. But generally, once you pass bylaws, those bylaws go into effect. So with the new national bylaws, previously one didn't happen, so it'd be 2 under the new bylaws. Which this would be my first one under the new bylaws. Running again would be a second.
Oh, okay, so it did the 2-term limit wasn't there initially.
No, I don't believe it was before. I don't remember what the old ones were anymore.
To clarify that, the old rules were not, or the old rules were in effect until last election. Last election was the first official election of the national BOD, so he has technically served 1 term.
Yeah, that's
Right.
correct.
Right.
So it's like 1.5 ish.
Yeah, it's not retroactive before that. Okay.
Okay, I understand. I was just under the impression that this was his second term technically. So thanks for the clarification.
Nope,
Yeah,
you're
thank
good. And we're working on it. And if we have time later, I did want to give the council an update on what we've worked with, just to get some more feedback on what we're currently working on as far as the term stuff for the arbiters as well.
Yeah, I can add that in there, or do we have that added already? I don't see that. So, I can add that to the end of the agenda if that's all right, and then we can. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so that would just leave with tomorrow's applicant for director of records. We still do not have one for the director of finance. Does anyone have an idea for a path forward on that? For those that are just joining, we're currently talking about the current elections. We got an update on the applicants for the roles or the BOD as it stands. We are missing we have no applicants for the director of finance. And so I was just trying to pull and see if anyone had any ideas for that. They've had about a month to get applicants up. There's been minimal engagement for posts being made. Okay, well, I think the way that it can shake out is if we do not have a way to fill that role, then the executive director can appoint or find an interim director, at least until the next chapter council meeting, and so we can revisit at that time. At least that is an avenue to get a little bit more time on that, about another month for it, but that'd be a really hard pressing on the chapter populace is to try and get someone to fill that role. Oh, the entire BOD. My bad. Yep. The BOD can appoint another board member to fill the responsibilities. Okay, next item on the agenda is the previous chapter council meeting agenda items. We had a vote on those. They did not meet the quorum requirements, and so they were not enacted. They did have support, but we were just missing enough chapters in order to meet the quorum requirements. It was proposed by Lexark and Damon to re-vote on those items. And does anyone else have any comments or concerns or questions on that agenda item? Otherwise, we'll just put that to a vote as part of the setup and go from there. Go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, so I understand that we didn't have quorum last time, and I understand that we're hoping to have quorum this time on the vote. But I mean, what happens if we don't get quorum again? Do we just keep kicking this down the road, or?
This is something that we have been going back and forth. We've been going back and forth with, but Brigadon's got a hand. Go ahead, Brigadon.
Yeah, so I kind of have a similar thought to Trent, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Lack of a vote is a vote, guys. If an issue is important, people will vote for it if they want it. We represent the populace of the game, and it's not like Tyverus hasn't been letting people know when votes are and stuff. So this precedent that we're setting of re-voting over and over probably isn't good long term. Just as a general rule, if something fails to reach quorum, then that means the populace didn't want it, and so didn't tell their representatives about it. In my opinion, and the opinion in my chapter. That's all.
Thank you. A little bit more directly to Trent's point. I got Zachary with a hand. Go ahead, Zachary.
I understand the point being made. I disagree. It is if the populace does not want it, then a lack of a vote should not count toward a negative outcome from the perception of those that are, voting on the issue. My concern with that would be that you could, in some ways, reward lack of engagement, and that's not really something that I want to do. I would significantly expect and generally anticipate that if a populace is not in is not of the mind to pass a particular item, then I think it's still the responsibility of the representative to vote no or vote to their members' preferences on that particular issue, but a vote should be issued.
Thank you. So once more to Trent's kind of direct point, yes, that is how the current procedure would go, is that if we do not get quorum on this vote, we are not allowed to take any formal action without quorum. And so the only possible recourse we have is to have another vote if we want to push that issue further. If it gets to where there's not enough drive or enough interest in order to continue making that proposal and seeking out those votes, procedurally, we would be required to just let it die or to kicking it down the road. But that's the way that we've had the bylaws for the last year or so. We have gone back and forth with quorum and having issues with quorum. We've tried a couple of different systems. We've tried reducing it further. It was put in with good intent in order to make sure you don't have just 2 or 3 chapters in the chapter council at a time, or even one chapter running the gamut and making whatever decisions they want. But I think it has kind of gotten out of hand with the other controls we have put in place. So we have the 2-week proposal deadline, we have the 2-week online voting deadline. These are all things that I think kind of nullify the need to have quorum really at all, as long as the meetings and everything else still remain public. We have that stuff available. So I just wanted to make sure that I did directly respond to yours before I continued on. So there you go. Tamorn, you had a hand.
Yeah, doesn't quorum update on a regular basis based off of the previous, 2 meetings?
Yes, so it is dependent on the number of chapters that participated in each vote. If a chapter comes in and votes, they are then counted for, at minimum, the next 2 votes. If they fail to vote in the next 2, they are removed from the quorum count, at least for the total pool of chapters that are considered quote-unquote active, which isn't necessarily directly to the chapter participating in DAG or playing DAG. It is mostly probably more accurate to say, is the rep active on the chapter council? I have been tracking that. I have been maintaining that. And in some cases, it also, which there's always going to be these quirks of the system where when we have a rule that says, 2/3 of active chapters, and active chapters are ones that have voted in at least one of the last 2 votes, sometimes a chapter will become active and that quorum will then increase even though they've just now joined in. So there are quirks with the way it's set up at this time. Go ahead, Trent. Unless, Tamorn, you had anything else.
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Trent.
I think you had a good point that with us having 2 weeks to vote, I mean, I think the quorum is kind of not necessary because you can't pull a fast one. Everyone's got 2 weeks to read everything and vote. We have a lot of chapters. Like, how many chapters do we have vote in that one? We had almost we had 25 chapters vote, right?
We did not have 25 chapters vote. We may have had 25 chapter reps vote.
Okay.
But we had, I think it was 10 or 11 some odd chapters.
Okay, so I think we had a lot of engagement, but we still didn't make quorum, and I think that's just an issue with, if quorum's gonna be shifting and we're gonna have 2 weeks to vote on things, I'm not necessarily feeling that quorum is productive in getting things done, but I mean, I'm new here and I'm willing to roll the punches and tell me what the rules are and I'll play the game. But it just seems to me like, I don't know, like an extra hoop.
That's fair. And so an alternative or a response to that, what is possible is we can go to the bylaws and we can make a proposal that specifically says, I want to strike the quorum requirements, whatever those numbers are. I don't remember them off the top of my head. And it would just take a rep to do that. We had pushback because there's been a lot of kind of hands in this issue trying to go from one to the other or trying to adjust this too aggressively. But we've kind of gone through the circus a couple of times with quorum. Do you have anything else, Trent, before I continue?
No, just thank you so much.
Yep. Zechariah was asking, would the current quorum count be considered skewed given the recent large and controversial issues? I mean, yes, and that is part of it. Is we had a big, large issue within the last 2 votes that we had a lot of participation. And so that is 100% coming back where chapters that are no longer as participant in the chapter council, they come in for their one issue, it gets inflated, and then we have to go through 2 votes until those chapters that choose not to participate drop off. And so I do believe the next one, it will be lower with the quorum count. But that is something that we still have to deal with the way the current system is written. And I believe this quorum update that last vote was the first one that we've had since the new system was in place. And so we still do have some earlier votes in there, we had a lot more attention to it. So, and I'm trying to do my best to kind of just add to the conversation. If people do want to speak verbally or have that conversation, more than welcome to. Do those quorums not unreasonable for a representative democracy? If we remove the quorum requirement, we no longer represent the whole. And that, I agree, is 100% in an ideal system what the intent is. But we're not taking it away from chapters that are available to participate. If we were doing these in back alley deals and we were not having public posts every 2 weeks or every month for the discussion, part of I'll compare this to another part of the bylaws. Bylaws say every vote has to be yes or no, so that there is no such thing as an abstain. There's no such thing as any ambiguity. I can't force your hand to vote. I can't force you to type in the message, anything. And so abstention is immediately available. It's automatically a no, even if the chapter rep just didn't participate. And so trying to get that representation, trying to get that participation, we're not getting that interest. We can't get it with the BOD members. We can't get it with the election. I'm not saying the BOD members specifically here. I mean, getting applicants for filling those positions. I know I went on a bit of a tangent, but go ahead, break it on.
So my understanding of the democratic process is this, and this is kind of coloring my opinion of this entire quorum argument, and the BOD and all that stuff. Everything kind of comes down to everything we would vote on is a change. So answering in the affirmative is the only way to make the voice of change heard. So when people don't answer at all, that is an answer in the negative, in my opinion. And because of that, we need stuff like quorum, because otherwise we will have those scenarios because where like five chapters vote in changes, because it's people only show up to about half of the meetings, individual chapters. Some of some of us obviously show up to more, but just as a general statement, people don't show up to every meeting. And there's a 2 weeks period, sure, but we just saw that 2 weeks period doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to pay attention. So if you remove the quorum requirement, people are going to propose things that the game doesn't want, and because people aren't paying attention, they're going to pass. We don't want that. Dagger here needs to remain Dagger here. Small changes here and there, obviously, because the game can improve. But otherwise, Dagger here needs to remain Dagger here. And quorum is one of the stopgaps for that. So that's all I've got on that. It's just I wanted to make sure that everybody heard my voice say that.
So I wanted to put my hand in there just so that I can speak for a couple minutes without having to completely drop it whenever somebody else puts their hand. So in response to that, I do see where you're coming from. I do 100% agree. And in some systems, that works. When you have required attention that needs to be there. We're in a room trying to decide where we're going for food or going to do something or play a game or whatever. Everybody is there and paying attention to it. Right now, we don't have the attention in order for that to be effective. We cannot make the changes that we need to make. We cannot run the government based on that argument of them not paying attention, not being interested enough. We don't have enough interest to even run DAG at this point. So that's where we're at. They completely say that based on that argument, the population is currently saying we do not need a director of finance. Okay, so bylaws say we need it. Populace says we don't. We don't have a way forward with that. We've already made some adjustments to try and reduce the quorum count by adjusting the definition of what an active chapter is. Because when it was started, it was here's the list of chapters in DAG. We're going to do 2/3 of those chapters. We couldn't get participation. We could not even accept the current bylaws without making an adjustment on what the definition of an active chapter is. So where we're even standing now, the entire bedrock of the current bylaws was built on adjustment of what an active chapter even means. And we're still having that conversation on how do we make that function, because we do not have enough buy-in from the populace or from the reps or from the chapters to continue with that. Does it need to be 1 as far as a quorum count? Probably not. Does it need to be 14? if we had more buy-in, it'd probably be fair to make sure that we don't have a diminished representation. But as Trent was agreeing, as long as we remain public and as long as we have other safeguards in place for you have a month of response to vote on any one topic from proposal to deadline, like we're giving everybody every opportunity that those that are interested in participating in the system and don't want it to have one or two chapters making these decisions, they're available. To Morton, go ahead.
All right, to touch on now, this is just my personal opinion on some of these matters, but another part of this is from a business side. The carryover of the abstaining from a vote being a negative vote has always been a direct result of how Ragnarok War Council happened. It's always been that since it was an on-site vote, if you didn't vote, your vote was considered a no. That's not how things necessarily work, though. Abstaining from actually voting on an issue, I don't feel is necessarily direct opposition to the issue at hand. It's just stating that you do not want to participate, or you are allowing the rest of the general populace to make the decision for you. We've never had an abstention option, and I've always had an issue with that. But the big thing about this is how we've set this up is the general populace did in fact state that they wanted certain concessions, and the quorum has always been one of those things. Now, where I've disagreed with it personally is that the quorum has always been based off of just real life time. That's the situation that we're in right now, where we had a hot button issue less than 2 votes ago. So we have a lot of quote unquote active chapters at the moment. Whereas you don't take into account the active chapters for the meeting. And this body has never been able to enact changes very well on verbiage of the rules. I personally believe that changing the quorum requirements to quorum requirements for the meeting at hand, so that everybody that was represented at the meeting as opposed to everybody that was represented at 2 meetings ago, should be taken into account, where it's just how many people were there this time, and if you have a clear majority of those votes for those people that were willing to participate, that should be your quorum requirements for that particular issue. But the way that this organization is currently set up, the chapter council has this ability to stalemate any progress. Now, that's all my personal opinion. From a business side, I don't know any other business that allows this type of action to work on how the corporation actually runs. We currently have a board of directors that can't do anything unless there is a quorum of a whole bunch of, shall we say, shareholders, telling them every decision has to be passed before the shareholders. This is not how businesses work. My business opinion as the current executive director of the DBGA is that there needs to be a separation between the business changes and the game changes. But that's not what the general populace wanted over time, so that's not what we currently have. So we're kind of stuck with what we've got right now. The quorum rules were voted into place. We have to abide by them, and it sucks because we can't pass anything. It has been a problem since day one, and this has been something that has been intentionally put in place for years to slow things down. That's just what I've got to say about that. But I don't agree that an abstention should be a no. That's been something that has always bothered me. Over.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trent.
I just wanted to clarify. I want everyone in Dagger to have a represented voice. I want, every single chapter rep here at these meetings. I want more conversation, more talking. That is the way forward, is getting more point of views and getting more engagement. But we can't not fix things because we don't have enough people listening. Like if we're going down a path that's really bad, but we can't get the engagement we need to change the rules, then where are we? So that's just the concern for me is like, I don't want to not represent members of Dagger. I want everyone to represent it. I would love it if every time we had a chapter meeting, we had every single chapter represented by 2 reps, but it's just not happening. And I wish we could do that. But I just want to know what our options are if that's not the case. And I think the quorum is a great idea if we get the engagement we need, but maybe we can lower it. I don't know what we need to do, but I don't think that people being irresponsible and not showing up to these meetings is them just saying, "Oh, I don't want that rule." I think it's more saying it's apathy. It's more I don't care. So, but I mean, that's just my opinion, and I know it's probably not popular, but
Thank you. Okay. We have kind of gotten off topic. I do appreciate everyone's input, and we can continue the conversation. I am all for that. Was just going to also kind of bring it up to the next point because the next few are kind of in the same vein. The next few agenda items. The agenda item 5 is to update the chapter council procedure such that any revotes required due to a lack of quorum automatically carry over from the previous vote unless changed by the chapter rep, and additional votes are simply added to that vote. Does anyone have any comments on either of those points or the conversation at hand? There's no comments or anything specifically against the last item. So yes, that will be voted on over the next 2 weeks, Hodor. Yes. Oh, I missed Elsie. Sorry about that. Elsie, you had a hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that I think the last vote we had kind of exemplifies the issue with what we have now, where we had 31 votes yes and 0 votes no. We had unanimous approval from 16 of the 26 active chapters. If every active chapter had turned out all at once to vote no, that still wouldn't have changed the result. That's how overwhelming the support was. But even with that, it didn't pass because we didn't have quite enough people. And I think that's about the clearest example there could possibly be that the current system is a problem.
Thank you. I think that is a very fair point and very good evidence to bring up for that. That the unanimous support, but still didn't pass due to quorum. Regular mentions not being in favor of this due to needing to revote entirely. So item 1 of the previous vote had 31 yes and 0 no, but still it does not pass because we were missing quorum. That was kind of what I was specifically meaning. Like the second item, yes, had a no vote or 2, or I didn't look at it specifically, but had 5 no votes and 25 yes votes. I agree. That one was not unanimous, but item 1 had 31 yes. Yeah. That's fair. I do tend to agree with you, Bregadon, and having chapters needing to revote. I can just see that also being a point of contention for the next thing of, okay, we still have the quorum requirement, and requiring them to revote is a avenue for that to be an issue further versus, oh, we just needed one more chapter. Let's just go approach one of those chapters that was missing. We don't need to go harp on everyone else for a second vote. So that's kind of my viewpoint on these two sides of this coin is the clerical, like, chemist in me says it's better to have them all revote, but the effectiveness of how we're going to operate, getting 1 or 2 more chapters just to respond quickly might be more efficient. Tomorrow I see you have a hand.
So not to beat a dead horse. So if you have a vote, you don't have a quorum. What you just said about hounding another chapter to step up and revote to be that other person, if they're actually active within the quorum, that is one option. Say, hey, you guys didn't vote. I can point to my own realm in particular on this one. 4th Age of Middle Earth, cast no vote for it. Pisses me off, but I'm not the chapter rep. Yeah, I'm neither of the chapter reps, so I did in fact reach out to both of them and said, "Hey, why didn't you guys vote?" Oh, you know, blah, 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 they gave me an excuse, whatever. So they basically dropped the ball on quorum for all of us. Pisses me off because it's my own damn chapter, and they were just lazy. So reaching out to non-active voting chapters is one way to do it. Pushing it to the next vote where they still have the option to step in and vote their no, if they so desire the next time, or be removed from the quorum requirement. That is one of the things. And as far as Bregadon said, sounds like people need to attend to their representative responsibilities. You are 100% correct in that. Yes, the chapter reps need to do their job. It is frustrating as hell as the current executive director when the chapter council doesn't do their job, when they don't show up to vote for these issues. But it's also extremely frustrating when the chapter council doesn't go after the non-active chapter council reps, as is their job, to get these people to do their things or to post changes to prevent these issues. That's all I had for that. Done.
Thank you. And so we're currently covering agenda items 4 and 5 with the previous chapter council vote, the revote, and the carryover of the previous votes. And so, as part of the update to the chapter council procedure, just kind of having a dialogue on that right now, kind of going back and forth with it. To be perfectly clear, they are still on there, and they will be, unless formally withdrawn, still voted over the next 2 weeks. But we're just having that conversation about them. I still see some individuals typing, so I'm just giving a moment for them to get their points out there. Hodor, to your point, this would require a bylaw change. No, because vote procedure is not handled by the bylaws. It's handled by the chapter council procedures, which are what we have agreed on how to do. So like the 2-week vote period, the 2-week limit on proposal submissions, revoting, all of that has been specifically how we have decided to conduct the chapter council meetings. That is not handled by the bylaws, and so it would not require a bylaw change. We can put it in there if we want as chapter reps. It would just be more, it would just be putting a proposal in that form, saying, I want to update the bylaws to include blah, blah, blah. The quorum change, yes, would have to be the quorum change would have to have a bylaw change because that is specifically stated in there. I don't know. I think MOA is separate from bylaws, that it is its own thing. Correct. Active as in no longer active on the chapter council. It is not specific to active as in there may still be players out there fighting every Saturday, and they may have 200 people coming out every weekend to play, but if their reps are not participating in the chapter council, that is the definition of active, is their participation on the council, specifically not real world play. Because we don't really have also a definition for an active chapter that exists outside of they are listed on the chapters that are, at least as a formal definition, concerning the bylaws and the MOA and those kinds of things. That if they have a signed contract, I believe they're considered active on infinitum, just the way that the contract had been written. Maybe that's not the case now, but they still exist.
To clarify that, until a chapter is actually removed from active status by the chapter council, if they have a contract in place, they are considered active.
Right. You see a few individuals still typing out, so I'll give them a couple more minutes. Correct. Everything. So the votes themselves for the previous items. The two things that did not pass that would be revoted on are the elections for directors being extended to a 3-year cycle instead of a 1-year cycle, and the armor thickness rule change. So those changes themselves would be bylaw and MOA changes. But the changes for today's agenda items of revoting and maintaining the previous votes are not bylaw or MOA changes. That is just chapter council procedure. So I know that's a bit mixed up, but the stuff we're talking about right now is just chapter procedure. The stuff that was voted on last time, that is bylaw and MOA changes. But do we want to revote on those? And when we do a revote, do we want to maintain the votes that were cast in the original vote? I hope that clears it up, Hodor. If it doesn't, let me know. I mean, so we're both of those items are going to be available for vote on these two. Go ahead, Hodor.
So, per the bylaws, in my understanding, so Tramon, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. Because they require a quorum, because the votes have already closed past the deadlines, per the bylaws, we would all have to recast a new vote anyways. This would not affect the votes, and we all have to vote new. That is my understanding. Correct?
My interpretation of the current bylaws is if somebody proposes a revote, it would be considered a separate new vote, even though the entire issue was exactly as before. So if the chapter council proposes that they look at Damon's proposal again for armor thickness and ask for a revote, it's seconded, it goes through to vote on it again. That is a completely separate vote.
So the agenda item of carrying over votes is impossible without a bylaw change.
It wouldn't necessarily be a carryover of the vote. It would be a request for a revote.
Right. That's what I mean, is that we have an agenda item right now that the previously cast votes from last meeting there's a desire to maintain those so we don't have to get all of those chapters to recast their votes. That we just have, you voted yes last time, your yes is maintained unless you change it. You're saying that that would have to be a bylaw change.
Not necessarily. If the chapter reps agree that their vote would carry over, that would be them basically voting in the affirmative or the negative, just like they did last time. It's just a re-recording of the same vote.
Okay. So we can do this without a bylaw change. It would, based on the procedures, as long as the chapter reps agree that you are effectively recasting your vote based on what it was last time.
Correct.
Okay.
Now they also have they will always have the option of changing their vote during the new voting period.
Okay. That's fair. And that is specifically stated in there as well.
Yeah, as long as the wording is slightly careful to cover that, I don't see how any of this would be violating the bylaws themselves or even the intent of the bylaws.
Okay.
Now, I do have one other issue I'd like to bring up if nobody else has a hand up.
Yeah, it's been pretty quiet right now. There's been some chat, but it's been, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's to address what everybody's really talking about right now, where, you know, they're talking about the indifference and everything else like that, whether or not they don't care. One of the biggest problems is with the system currently in place, chapter representatives now have the option to basically stall any course of action by the chapter council by popping in and voting once and then disappearing for 90 days. If they want to actually cause the chapter council to not be able to pass any form of legislation for 90 days, they could activate their own chapter to cause a problem for quorum. Or you could even have, say, 3 individuals who maintain representative status for their chapter as 2 reps under them, so they actually operate under 6, 8, 10 votes to stall something out, where you'll see certain chapters pop up only for the hot button issues, and they don't want to be part of the daily grind that is what is really the chapter council still trying to get the national organization up and running the way that the populace wants. So, again, these were positions and policies and procedures put in place by previous people. If you guys want to change it, proposals need to be made to change the bylaws to change the verbiage. Over.
Thank you. Trent.
I just to piggyback on what Tamoran's saying is, you know, with the way this is going, we could totally get pigeonholed, and just become non-functional because people just pop in and out and vote when they want to. I don't think that that people not voting is a negative, because I just think it's not engagement. I think it's just them not caring to pay attention to what's going on in the organization, and we're allowing those people to paralyze us. For example, position 1 on our last vote, every single vote was cast yes. And like a rep before me had just stated, if every other vote had voted against it, it still would have carried. Now, what that does is it says someone who wants to stall the organization or who wants to see things go poorly can go, well, if I vote because they're 1 chapter short, then no matter what I vote, it passes. But if I don't vote, then it automatically fails, even though, you know, 60% of the game wants this. I, as the, you know, representing 2% of the game, can say, no, I know that 60% of you want it, but I'm not going to vote for it, so you're not going to have quorum. And so how is that democratic? I don't think it is. And that's why I think that the requirement of quorum in this instance behooves people to pick and choose when they vote, so that way their vote can carry more leverage if we do not achieve quorum. So they hold out till later instead of voting immediately, because I think that the votes that are cast should count. And we need to get past this issue because we're not representing what Dagger here wants. If 60% of the game says we want this, but we don't reach quorum because one chapter looks and goes, well, I was going to vote, but now if I don't vote for it, it doesn't pass. You know what I'm saying? So there is you can't say that's democratic emotion when it's not, because we have, one person has the ability then to decide what against 60% of the people, and there's nothing they can do about it. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Tomorrow.
So a simple fix for this would be just a minor change to the verbiage of the quorum requirements. And what it could easily say is that for a vote to pass, it needs to either meet the current quorum requirements or exceed the overwhelming majority of what the quorum requirements would be should quorum not be met. So in the case of issue number 1 on the last one, where enough chapters actually voted in the affirmative to pass it, even if all the other votes were no and had met quorum, there was no way that quorum would have stopped the vote from actually proceeding. So you can have the verbiage of the rule state that you either need to have the majority for the quorum of the meeting or an overwhelming majority that it couldn't have been filibustered by a lack of quorum, basically. And it's just a verbiage change in how that particular rule is written. Over.
Thank you. All right, we've gotten a little bit into the weeds. I'm going to kind of move us forward a little bit, just to the next agenda item, because there hasn't really been too much left to discuss based on those specific items for 4 and 5 for the last votes and the carryover. It's been more about the systemic issues as far as quorum in general. Number 6 on the agenda was conducting the chapter council head elections. We as a chapter council can elect our chapter council head. And so I had submitted and had seconded the proposal to do that at this election. Do we have anyone else interested in functioning as the chapter council head for the next year? Okay, so I'm going to speak my piece on this. I will not be chapter council head for the next year. I have done this for the last year. I have done what I can. There may have been able to be done better. It may have been able to be done worse, but I am not going to be chapter council head. I will participate. I will assist, but the current issues that we are discussing are part of the issue of why I do not want to be chapter council head. I think the way we are set up and the way we have put this together is not effective for a long-term strategy. The apathy and the lack of interaction with the general populace or interest in running DAG as a whole. I can say that I have done what I can, and I have been here and I have helped and I have been part of it, but I think this ship is sinking, and without completely turning the boat around, I don't know what else to do with it. So that's my piece on this. I do appreciate everyone's time. I do not regret helping out and being here, and I greatly appreciate the love and support and the nominations and all that, but I can't do this another year. I'm tapped out. Y'all are all great. I do appreciate every single one of you, and even the reps that aren't here. Like, y'all are awesome. It's just we got a lot to dig out, and I don't think we're making too much progress. yeah, y'all are great, and like I said, I appreciate it. I'm doing the best I can to try and balance the time and the energy and the conversations, because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we have a couple points and then we go off on a tangent, but it is what it is. So, unless anyone else has a point to nominate themselves or anything else, we can continue moving forward. I don't know how, but we can start talking about the MOA changes that have been submitted. See a couple of people typing. I'll give them just another minute. Jeffrey, I see your post in the motions and votes chat to make things simpler, a motion to run the previous 2 votes again in full. Part of our current procedures has been to keep that proposals had to be done 2 meetings prior to the current meeting. I don't believe that you had made the original submission. I think that was Lexark and Damon on both of those. So that would have to be discussed and voted on at the next meeting, unless we make an adjustment for those 2, which I think we'd have to have with the approval of like Lexark and Damon to adjust their proposals. Go ahead, Hodor.
When are you stepping down? And if memory serves, at the beginning of each meeting, we don't have one. We have to appoint a temporary head. Correct?
So my intent was to do it this meeting if we had another individual step up and do it immediately. I can probably do the next one just to buy another meeting for you guys, but I will draw a hard line at the next meeting will be the last chapter council head meeting that I will formally run. As far as electing them when we don't have one, I believe like this is one of those things that is it's not formally set up for how we need to do it step by step. It just says we can elect one and we can have one. We have it set up currently that it runs, I believe, from April to April, and I may have missed the deadline to do it as part of the original elections, but at this point, it's however we decide to do it as a chapter council, we can vote in as the chapter council head. You can do it meeting to meeting if that's what you really want to do. All right. Like it is not a bad position. It is not a hard position. It is just like I drove overnight last night to get home and still had the meeting to be here, and I would still be here, but it's different to run it than it is to participate. And most of the time, 99% of the time, it's just wait until the next meeting. Sending out a ping about every other week of, hey, get your votes in, or here's the results and all that kind of stuff. Okay, seems like it's gotten quiet, so we will continue to move forward. Agenda item number 7 is the MOA change to go from having archers allowed to call shots for clarity to sorry, give me 1 second. Effectively giving the recipient the ability to determine if the shot struck properly, whereas before we did not have that. Before it was just the archer making that call. So do we have questions, comments, concerns on that MOA change? I will find it in the proposals chat and give a ping for it so that we can find it easier. It is in the motions and votes chat. It is just above the next meeting vote we had a moment ago, posted by Jeffrey. Go ahead, Sil.
So, if you read the original rule, this doesn't actually change anything. It just clarifies, because there is no like the archer being allowed to call for clarity doesn't mean that the person has to take the hit. That's still on the person to take the hit. It's just this change just makes it more clear. So when you get into an argument with an archer on the field, you go, no, I actually can call my own shot, just like I can do with every other weapon on the field. Over.
Thank you. I do think having the part where it states that they may call out to let their target know where the hit landed or if it was good. Like saying if the hit was good, I think having that still in there does make it a little bit ambiguous. Like as far as putting the impetus on the recipient. But I can see where the rest of that should be, like, does kind of clarify that. Eisen, I do see that you had posted in the general chat. I do appreciate you moving to the meeting chat. It just helps me not have to monitor as many channels. It kind of keeps it a little bit more linear. There is another post, I think, somewhere with that, Damon. That's the next MOA change item. If a weapon accidentally blocks an arrow from hitting a target, etc., etc. So. Go ahead, Zuckred.
All right. Per Manual of Arms, Statute 4.1.12 miscellaneous. Whenever you strike an opponent from behind, simultaneously call out the color of your weapon, quote unquote red or one-handed green, so that your opponent will know how to react. If a weapon color is not called out, expect that your opponent will treat it as a hit from a blue weapon, the most common weapon encountered on the battlefield. I quote this because it is the nearest example in the Manual of Arms to the standard being applied to the archers here, which, if you look at this and you think about who is actually calling that out, if let's see here. So it puts the onus on the weapon thrower or the weapon user to define the I mean, in here for this example, we're defining the weapon type, but the precedent is that the call can come from the weapon owner, and I think that fits this new proposal for what it's worth. So that's the current precedent.
I think the key of this change is going from the archer saying, hey, it was a good leg shot, to the recipient saying it was not a good leg shot. Like, the archer can clarify that, hey, it was a shaft or a head or whatever, but it puts it back on the recipient as far as, and correct me if I'm wrong, still, I may be misinterpreting it, but it puts it back because every other shot that you take, it is on the recipient to decide whether or not it's good, too forceful, not good enough, whatever. Archers are the only one that's the exception where it comes from the thrower. I think that's the key change, is that it's going from archers are saying it's good and it was head and it was your head, to, hey, it was the head and it was your leg, and then the player saying, okay, it wasn't good enough though.
Yeah, exactly. This does two things. One, the game has always been played this way. This proposal just makes it more clear who has say over what part of the interaction.
Right. The recipient has final authority over how good. Okay. Are there any other comments for this? I think we've clarified it a little bit. See, Raven is typing. I give them a moment. Okay. I'm not seeing too much further discussion. I do see that there's mention about sluff shots and everything. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything directly, like a direct response or something. Okay. MOA change rule 2, also proposed by Syl and seconded. Everything else that was required. This is changing how weapons that accidentally block arrows work. I did tag the original in the general chat, so if you want to see the original from Syl, that is linked in the CC general chat. This is saying that if you block an arrow from hitting a target, the arrow is considered to obstruct the arm as opposed to have been carried through. So if you go and you block with your 8-foot spear and it's pointed straight up, it takes your arm as opposed to just ignoring it and continuing through. Go ahead, Damon.
All right, can everyone hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me? So in reference to that, if we're just trying to clarify, like if it goes to the weapon, I think it just needs to be clarified in the rules. I think if it's, say it's the tip of an 8-foot glaive and the arrow falls away, I think that should just be considered a dead arrow. We shouldn't have to worry about, oh, well, did it go past and hit someone else? I think it's just shitty luck and it's just a dead arrow. Now, if you're wanting to make a rule to clarify, well, if it's a weapon and it's right at my head, then that's a headshot. I think that's something that we should do, because I'm not sure if that's actually in the rules or not. And done.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trent.
My understanding has always been that missile weapons go through held weapons. Like, not missile weapons, sorry. Arrows go through spears, hand weapons, glaives, and all that. So if I'm holding a spear and it's crossed my body, according to this rule, and it hits the haft of my spear in front of my torso, then instead of taking being dead, I'm taking an arm.
That is correct. That is what this change would do. You are correct with what the original ruling has been. Is that the kind of crux of the issue as it stands right now is yes, in your case, if you have your spear across your body and it hits the core of your spear, as it stands right now, you'll be dead. With this change, it would be arm.
So this could fundamentally change the way our game works, guys. Because a person who's fighting Florentine, who has their swords crossed in front of them, could run at an archer, and the archer could shoot them center of mass, and instead of getting hit in the head or the body where the arrow would have landed had it not hit their swords, they would take an arm and then still be rushing the archer. So this has big ramifications. And I'm not suggesting that they're moving to block the arrow. I'm just saying if they passively have the swords in front of them and they charge an archer, that's what this rule would say.
Nope, that's fair. That is a good point. This would be a direct nerf to archers in that situation. It would help archers like Syl has intended for when a spear is pointed directly up. You don't have to try and bust out the trigonometry and the calculus in order to figure out where it would have landed. But I don't know how much that comes up. But I'm also not an archer. Hi, Delcy.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone's reading the text chat, so I just wanted to bring up. I think one of the issues with this is that it incentivizes you to block arrows with your sword, which may be illegal, but heralds aren't everywhere all the time. It incentivizes you to get your sword in front of the arrow so that you can take arm instead of death. And the reason that we say no blocking arrows is because it's a safety hazard, and this is going to make that happen more. And
oh, go ahead.
So someone's pointed out that heralds should be calling people if they're intentionally blocking arrows with weapons, but it can be hard to tell, and the heralds can't see everything all the time, and I think then we've gotten out of the thing, which was the reason for changing it was so that you wouldn't have to have a discussion on the field about whether it would have hit you, but now you have to have a discussion on the field with a herald about whether you blocked it on purpose, and I feel like we're not really gaining that much clarity, and we are introducing an incentive to play unsafely.
Okay, I see that still. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying it and not just deleting it. I would have been lost. Okay. See, Raven is typing. I'm gonna move forward a little bit, and if it is a callback or anything else that needs to be brought up, we can circle back. MLA change rule 3, or MLA change 3, item 9 of the agenda, also proposed by Syl, seconded, all that stuff, is an update to the heal. I think this clarifies is attacked or distracted. It's changing it to is struck by weapon or contact is broken for any reason. Then it must be reassigned. So it's going from distracted to clarifying struck by weapon. think there's also just touching on what Raven and the conversation's going into is I don't know that's 100% clarified because it's like, oh, you're not allowed to swing at arrows, you're not allowed to like actively block based on that, but like those items are also still there, and defining actively block, whereas okay, if I'm going up against an archer and I put my arm across my body, is that an active block, and is it still supposed to carry through to my body, or is keeping my arm just in front of my body good enough? And passive blocking, not moving any other way. So I put armor crossbody, it gets hit with the arrow. Did I block the arrow, or was I just... Diz, go ahead.
Yeah, so essentially, I believe that this could be the source of a lot of chaos on the field because now noob's gonna noob. What if new people hearing this rule create different thickness of weapons to make them wider to block instead of a kill, they take an arm. Also, heralds now have to recognize what is a person's stance as well as, okay, did they actively block this or is that just how they hold their polearm? So I think if we do pass this, guys, we also have to clarify a lot of other things along with this. Over.
Yeah. Elsie, go ahead.
I think this would also make for just, this is less on the safety side, but it would make for some weirdness where, like, if I'm holding my spear or my glaive upright and an arrow nicks off it 3 feet above my head, I now lose my arm to that. And that just feels kind of silly. Which isn't a safety issue, but it kind of runs into, like, can you now, as an archer, shoot if there's a spear poking through a shield line? Can you take a shot at the spearhead to kill the arm? That doesn't feel like that would be a good rule, but it would be kind of a natural consequence to this.
That's fair. I just want to touch on one thing real quick. I believe I saw it mentioned as well that this was, okay, if you're firing behind the front line and it gets blocked by a spear that wasn't anywhere in the interaction, like the archer wasn't aiming for the spear and the spear wasn't actively trying to block, life happened and the arrow hit that spear, trying to communicate to behind that front line who you were aiming at that, oh yes, it should have or would have hit you, hit another individual, a secondary archer, whatever. Trying to communicate that is, I think, where this is trying to solve that, where it's like, okay, the arrow is still useful, it still did a job, it was just now bringing it from trying to calculate where it went. But in my mind, and where I've mostly interacted with archers, it's either, oh, I'm getting shot from a million miles away and it's super clear where I got hit, or it's right up close. And I don't know, I think on the bigger fields this may be a bigger issue, but I don't know, like on a weekly practice and in general gameplay it's going to be as big of an issue for it being that far out. Go ahead, Torn.
All right, 30 years in DAG as an archer. You shoot, you hit somebody's spear 3 foot up on an 8 foot long spear. You have no idea where that damn arrow is going beyond the line. It's a dead arrow. It has always been a dead arrow. The moment an arrow touches something, that becomes the stopping point. The only time this was ever an issue was when weapons were directly in front of a potential impact that the weapon actually stopped a headshot or a body shot. That's the reason that the rule was always put in place. So incidental contact, and I've never seen an archer call out a hit 2 rows behind the front line for hitting a spear tip that's 8 foot up in the air, saying, "Oh, I would have hit that guy in the chest." I would walk across the field and call total bullshit on that guy every time. And you know, it's one of those ones. I've seen a lot of good honor among archers when they make a shot and it glances off of something and then actually does hit somebody. Like 2 feet to the left of where they're going to say, be like, hey, dude, don't take that. It bounced off of Damon's red, and be like, that was not a legit shot. So it really comes down to, I think you guys are putting a little bit too much thought into all of these hypotheticals. Yes, the heralds will have to deal with it on the field at the time, but they're going to have to deal with it anyways. I don't think that, that hypothetical spear way the hell up in the air is the big issue here. Over.
Okay. Thank you. See several people typing, so give them a couple minutes. Okay. Once more back on to agenda item 9. This was the healer update to going from if the healer or injured person is attacked or distracted or contact is broken, it must be recited, to struck by a weapon or contact is broken, must be recited.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Elsie. Yep.
I would say that makes sense to me. It's always seemed a little silly that if you're a mile behind the line and someone sees that you're healing and takes an arrow shot at you and misses, that means you have to start over. So I think you have to be directly engaged. I would say that if you have a shield, you can't shout around the shield if someone comes at you with a sword, and if you're actively blocking with a shield, that would be one thing. But if you're just behind and someone shoots an arrow at you, that shouldn't break it, I wouldn't think.
Thank you. Any other any other comments in regards to it specifying being struck by a weapon versus attacked or distracted? Always combat. It's always combat. Surprise, roll for initiative. Go ahead, Trent. Eisen, I'm so sorry, Trent. Go ahead, Eisen, I just saw yours.
It's all good. I just wanted to kind of make a broad statement about all the rules everyone's proposing in this whole conversation. Is that I'm seeing from a lot of the comments that everyone kind of has the same feel about not wanting to break flow of combat, and so I'd recommend that everybody think twice about proposing rules, because making rules more complicated, because the second we make more rules more complicated, I'm seeing someone mentioning 3 feet past, the half would count maybe, and it's like the more complicated we make the rules, the more arguing we're gonna have on the field, and that we should really think hard before making changes like that. So I just wanted to make a broad speaking comment. So thank you.
That's fair. No, very good point. Thank you. Now I believe it was Trent. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, I always try to look at the rules as, like raw, like rules as written. So what this is stating is that unless the healer or the person being healed are physically struck by a weapon in their limbs or body, the healing spell can continue. So if I'm healing someone and they're kneeled in front of me and I've got my shield and they've got their shield and I'm leaning up against them and I'm healing them and people are shooting arrows and just hitting our shields, we could continue. Or for say we're in the same situation and someone keeps poking our shields with a spear, we could continue to heal. But the moment one of us actually takes damage, that's when the heal would break. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I think that healing is cool. I think it's kind of rough in our game. It's really hard to pull off. So I think it's a unique aspect, and I kind of like it. But again, obviously they couldn't, like, if it's physical damage or they break contact or they get distracted because they're under attack, that's different, But yeah.
Go ahead, Zachary.
Yeah, I wanted to add. So Trent, as written, this does still have provisions, obviously, for if contact is broken for any reason, then yeah, the heal would cancel, and then additionally, from my perspective, it's really hard to continue counting or reciting a poem or whatever while you're under direct attack. And so I think that this is kind of counterpointed or balanced by the fact that you're still having a delay, or you're still having at minimum a distraction that is going to not necessarily cancel the poem, but will still delay the heal, which is going to kind of counterbalance the buff a little bit. So I wanted to add that in, and that should be a consideration.
Yeah, because I mean, I've definitely been healing somebody, and we both had shields up, and an archer has seen me healing them and shot our shield, and we had to restart. And then they just wait, a couple seconds, and then shoot another arrow at us, and it just keeps plinking off our shield. It's not distracting. We're not even actively defending. It's just kind of annoying.
Okay, Zachary, was that your point, or yep, was that the whole thing?
Yeah, that was my point. Is that there's still a counterbalance to the buff.
Okay, thank you. Tamori.
Yep.
So you're basically just removing the broken concentration aspect of things and replacing it with damage. Is that how this is? Sorry, I actually haven't read it because I try not to read rules changes. Just let you guys do your thing. But it's always been my understanding that if you could break the concentration of the healer, like get them to actually stop reciting their poem by distracting them, that's what stopped the issue, whether it was through poking the shields, hitting them with a sword, or whizzing an arrow right by their face without actually making contact. If they stopped their poem, that's always been what broke the healing. So you're basically saying now that they would actually have to be contacted? Is that the proposal?
No, the change is more for the direct attack. It changes the direct attack aspect of the healing poem. Because if you get distracted and you can't remember where you are, well, then start over. I'm going to try and have people guess how many syllables they were into their healing poem. So the distraction aspect of it is still intact, but it's the what is under direct attack. Are you
If you don't mind real quick. So yeah, the original says is attacked or distracted. Define attacked. Is getting shot by an arrow from somebody that's 300 feet away enough of an attack, even if it missed? Is that enough to warrant being reset? This is being struck, which was then being interpreted as taking damage, but I don't know that my reading of that would be that way. I know I'm kind of hijacking this for a second, but being struck by a weapon, if it hits my shield, is that enough for me to restart my poem? And I don't need direct responses, but that to me has been what the kind of crux of this change has been is, okay, if somebody fires an arrow at me and it misses, I'm not restarting. If they fire an arrow at me and it hits my shield, current MOA, I would restart. This change, arrow defined as a weapon, I don't know, but that's kind of where it is. It's not necessarily being like, if they restart their poem because they forgot their syllables, that's going to happen anyway. You should restart that regardless. But direct attack versus, or struck versus attacked is what the kind of change is.
Probably, I think my intention was more. It should probably read, has their body struck by a weapon.
Right. If you take damage, I think is what the intent was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. If the, yep.
Yeah, because I mean, in legitimate extant finds of like actual shield pieces, they were used specifically to stop arrows, so that people could remove wounded soldiers, move around, do their thing. That's, you know, basically what a pavis is. It was a shield that you put down on the ground and it stood up on its own so that you could free up both your hands to do shit. One of which might be tying off a wound. Who cares if there's 20 arrows sticking in the damn thing? An arrow hitting a shield, even on somebody's back, if they continue their poem, I've always said, you know, hey, power to them. Just like Damon said, you know, if they can continue with that poem, power to them.
So my interpretation up to this point has been, if I'm under attack and I get hit by anything anywhere ever, if it's on the shield or anything, I will restart my poem. This, for Sill's clarification, which it probably needs to be updated, is if you take damage, which is then more akin to what you're mentioning to Morn, as far as like, oh, if it hits my shield or hits whatever, and I can continue my poem, then that's, I think that is the intent of what this revision is supposed to accomplish, is to get to that point where you can use shields and you can actively block and you can participate, where before, oh, somebody just nudges your shield with a spear. Based on my reading of the MOA, it was I personally restart the poem. That's everything there. I think we're on Alcy.
Yeah, I was just going to offer that if we did for some reason want to go with kind of an in-between, we could say that if it's interrupted if you take damage or are engaged in melee combat. So if someone comes in with a sword and you're fending them off with a shield, that interrupts. But if you block an arrow or a javelin, that doesn't. So that would be another option, is just if you physically engage them and they're having to fend you off, that's one thing. But if you're like an archer or javelin, they have to actually take damage.
Thank you. I just wanted to further clarify that I would prefer to see it say specifically you take damage and then have, for example, losing an arm or a piece of armor. That would be, for me, 100% this would work better would be if it had that as opposed to just being struck. Because the way I would still read this is struck by a weapon would, for my mind, remove archers. Because to me, an arrow is not a weapon. It is a ammunition or something along those lines. I might be incorrect on that. But a spear hitting my shield or any of those things would still constitute it based on the current wording. That's the end of my hand. I yield the floor. Archers are weapons. Yes, throw the archers. Is there anyone against, or anyone have comments against clarifying it to specifically say take damage with the examples as far as losing a limb or a piece of armor? I think either. I think if it's either individual, I know I'm talking instead of time, either individual, the healer, or we maintain that it is either the healer or the person being healed. If either of them take damage, then you restart the poem.
To clarify, if the person being healed takes further damage,
they're dead anyway.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it's-
if they do have armor,
unless
though,
it's an
like-
arrow and it's or a piercing weapon, but still, that's another wound that you would have to heal.
But like if they take like so you're wearing chest armor and you got blued in the leg and you're on your knees, then if you get an armor piece taken, I think they should still have to restart their poem.
Greg, how big are you?
Is there anyone against updating it to say the damage still, or would you be against specifying in that updated verbiage?
No, because it's
That's the intent,
completely
right?
yeah, it's the intent.
Okay. I wanted that said and on the record. I wanted it verbalized.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's the intent.
Okay. Unless I hear anyone else against that, I will update the verbiage on that to specify if either person takes damage, for example, loses a limb, or armor damage, the poem will have to be restarted. Okay. Last two agenda items. First one, item number 10. This is the MOA change update by Cirale. Cirale, if you want to take it away.
Not too much more beyond the proposal there. This is pretty much just helping us outline officially how MOA changes are done, because in the past they've been done at Reg War Council, but obviously now that's not the thing. Anybody has any questions, please feel free to hand.
Just for clarity, do we have a link to the proposal itself specifically? I had it listed in here as like a on there. I need to re-find it if you don't mind.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds to get over there.
Oh, is it the second or the third to last message on there? On the MOA committee chat?
Let me check, because I'm on my phone. It is also one of the pinned messages where 7.11 is the bulk of it, I believe.
Okay, so I see the post from 4.3, and then I see one below that says current bylaws verbiage, and then lower than that it says proposed for 7.12.
That's for the bylaws changes. We did one for the MOA changes, so if you go up, the one that's also 7.11.
See it. Okay. I'm going to copy and paste that one from April 3rd into the motions and
Excellent.
Yep, I got it.
Who? I love nerds.
Okay, I posted that as well. Just codify the actual procedure we use to make the MOA changes. So yeah, if we do have any questions, comments, concerns on that, we can bring those up. If everyone's good to go, then we'll move forward with the Arbiter bylaw update with Reacher.
Additionally, just as a side note, I believe everybody is able to view the bylaws and the MOA changes committee. Not all can comment, but you're also welcome to look in there for all sorts of stuff.
Okay. Reacher, you said we're still having the meetings, or do you have any further update with the Arbiter update that we talked about at the, I know it was like a million years ago, earlier in this meeting?
Yeah, I was just going to give everybody what we're currently going to propose. I believe at this rate we were waiting for after elections to propose it, just because it would affect arbiter elections. One of the biggest issues we felt was everybody was complaining about lack of oversight for the arbiter. We would be moving, simply put, we'd be moving to 3 council of arbiters. All 3 of them are elected. I know that's rough considering we're having struggles to get people for the board members as is. However, the way it would work is the most senior member of the arbiter board would serve as the board position, and the other 2 would be, learning and filling in as alternates as needed. Sorry, it happened at just the wrong time where I'm not standing right next to my computer to read it. Let me get back here. So basically, there'll be a new arbiter elected every year, with the newest arbiter falling in line as the most junior arbiter. The next year, a new arbiter would be elected. Basically, it's a rotating block of 3 arbiters. That gets that part done. That was our biggest headache, is trying to make sure it was fair to everybody. And I know that was a concern a lot of people had. There was a lot of discussion about letting the arbiter take over a safety role or a bigger safety role in the game. Kind of felt that was outside of our purview because we were just trying to get it better functional. And that's really about it. If anybody has questions or comments on that, that's fine. I just wanted to give an update on that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know more work is being done and more work needs to be done in order to get all the kind of details lined up. So I appreciate that. We're still kind of on that. Anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns in those regards? Eric is making some suggestions as far as majority vote or unanimous for the panel of arbiters.
It was the majority vote of 2 of the 3 or minimum.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ericos.
I really like
Yeah,
this idea. I think it's
10%.
fantastic.
Yep. And like I said, is the most senior person would serve as the actual board seat, with the other 2 being, seconds and alternates. Everybody has the power. All 3 have the power to investigate a case and etc. Just one person on the board, because we wanted to specify, because that would get messy as if all 3 of us were serving on the board or all 3 people were serving on the board. It would get messy. So that's why we specified the most senior would be the board position as well.
Wouldn't the most senior board position be elected?
It would be. So as it is now, okay, let's say, just for hypothetically, let's say I'm reelected and this goes into effect. This change that we're proposing does get changed. There would be an election for 2 more arbiters. We would have to sort out who those 2 are, as far as I want to pull out names of people that have, if they don't mind. Let's say Ericos, you get voted as a 2nd arbiter, and Timorin, for whatever, gets voted as a 3rd arbiter. So, just from point of view, I would be the senior arbiter this year. Next year, I fall off of the list, as I've ran my 2 years, and now I'm off the list. Erico, since you were number 2, now you would move up to be the senior arbiter, and there would be a third arbiter elected as the most junior. So it's always a new arbiter elected every year, serving in the most junior position, with the most senior person who has been there a couple years serving on the board.
The BOD specifically, right?
Correct. Does that answer that, Erico, or did I screw it all up for you?
Why not just vote for those positions?
They're all three voted. It's just when, like, we're not. It wouldn't be
Vote for the
changing.
position of board member. Vote for the positions of not board members. That's what I'm saying.
Let me also point something out, because you have to take into account. I have to agree with Ericos on this one. You need to vote for the board member's seat, because you may have a year in which you have turnover of 3 all brand new arbiters.
So the way the system was set
No,
up
that's
is
not
that
the way this works out.
Right. The Reacher would have this would also hinge on the extension of the arbiter position being a 3-year position instead of a 1-year position. And so I would be elected, or Reacher's elected this year. Next year, Chivers is elected, and then the next year, Remedies are elected. But every year, you're still going to have 3. It's just one of them is going to fall off from being most senior to no longer being arbiter to the next one being the most senior.
I understand what you're saying, but take into account all 3 arbiters can vacate their post at once.
I mean,
and then you
all
have to
5 board
vote
members
3
can vacate their
new
point.
arbiters into the positions.
Right, and then that's just something we'll have to figure out. I mean, technically, all 7 or all 6 of our board members could vacate our offices as it is now. Come on.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that before enacting that, bear in mind worst case scenario. So put something in place in the verbiage now to handle said situation, so that it's not a what the hell do we do now that this has happened. If it does happen, have a policy and procedure in place prior to it happening. That's my only concern with it, and particularly from a board of directors position, because they are in fact the more important of the 3 arbiters.
I think that would be clarified at the point of if all 3 of them. So right now, if Reacher said, I'm done being arbiter and I'm stepping out and I'm no longer going to do it, we would reelect that one individual. I think it would be part of the reelection setup is, okay, if we need to reelect all 3, then
you need to
it
reelect
would
all
just
3.
be, right. And it'd be specified, this is the board, the BOD arbiter position, and then the other 2 are the junior arbiter positions. I think, and we could write that in there. We could put that verbiage in there.
Yeah, I would just suggest changing the verbiage to handle that. And the only reason that I really bring it up is I can see one situation in which all 3 arbiters would vacate their post, where you have a unanimous decision by all 3 arbiters to remove an individual from the game, and then the chapter council come in and remove that decision. And all 3 arbiters go, excuse my language, fuck you all. We're out. This was hard on us. You totally disrespected our opinions. If you don't want us to do our jobs, we're out. And I've seen tempers get that hot before in this game. So it is a possibility that all 3 of those positions would in fact vacate at once. It's a slim chance, but it's there. So change the verbiage that it's just in place that, you know, in the event that you have to elect 3 brand new arbiters midterm, the first one to be elected is going to be the BOD position. And then subsequently the other 2 are going to be the non-BOD position. Over.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thank you. Any other hands, comments, concerns, questions? Okay, anyone else have any callbacks in general? Hodor.
Just to clarify, we are re-voting on the leather proposal and the bylaw proposal from the last meeting.
So we are having a vote to revote. we are unable to make the decision to conduct the revote until the decision is made that we can do that. So right now, the vote is going to be to do we want to allow ourselves to do the revote and to allow ourselves to carry over those votes. I understand this is frustrating. I agree, and I'm there with you. And we do not have the
two votes on it then.
yes.
Because I would be yes to the revote, but no to the votes rolling over.
So yes. So the way that I see it right now, the way that we currently understand our procedures and what we're doing is we're going to vote this time on do we want to have a revote and carry those over, because we can't really make that decision without going through our current procedures. And then we can do that, the revote, and carry them over if that passes or not.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, and I know it sucks that it's going to be extended over 2 more meetings, and I don't see a way around that with our current procedures. Thank you, Trent.
Okay, so we're voting to see if we want to revote on the issue. That's the understanding, right?
Yes.
So could we, if he proposed it and we seconded it, we couldn't vote on it until next meeting anyway, correct?
I think it would, based on the verbiage as it currently stands, it would be part of the following chapter council agenda. Because it says revote on those items. Like, agenda item 4 says specifically we want to revote on those. And so, hold on. I am ignorant. Disregard what I have said. I am tired. I think I had this written out poorly for this current meeting. Agenda item 4 is previous items revote. So we're just going to revote on those items and have them there. And we're going to revote on those 2 of the armor change and of the other item that I have forgotten that didn't have as much support. I apologize.
Okay.
I have gotten mixed up. We are going to have those both items are going to be opened up for a revote as part of this vote. I had it written down poorly.
Okay,
And
so we're gonna vote as if it was proposed and seconded, and we're just gonna have a clean slate. And we're just gonna vote it, right?
Correct. And then we will have
Okay.
another item added that will be to update the procedure to carry over votes in the case of a revote. I apologize. That was my bad. I should have done that better.
No, thank you so much for working on this rat's nest. Thank you.
You're good. You're good. I think it was probably written better. I just, when I was writing the agenda, I got myself mixed up. So yes, I apologize for that. Thanks. Thank you for clarifying that and asking that. And Hodor as well. That when I started to explain it to Hodor, I was like, wait a second, this is I don't think it's the way that this is supposed to be done. Or the way that it was intended when I wrote the agenda. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Did I miss anyone else's posts? I don't think so. Tamorn, I see you had a hand. Did I clarify that enough?
Yeah, that was what I was going to point out, is that you actually had it set as
an actual revote and not just a vote to have a vote.
You didn't have to go through the process of voting to revote. Over.
Sometimes I have an extra go-to 10 line, and it just... Yeah.
Oh, it's all right. When you said that, I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, now I'm spinning.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not seeing any other callbacks. I'm not seeing anything else. If I can get a motion to adjourn in a second, that'd be great. Awesome. Thank you all for participating. We will be closing the recording. It will be ending now.